Gary, nice to see you again. Thanks for joining the Mark Divine Show. How things going where you're at?
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Mark. It's really good to talk to you again.
Yeah, no, and this is a pretty good time to talk about unfucking the nation, which is the name of your
yeah,
podcast.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Oh man, well, we spoke a few years ago, and so I was super enjoyed the conversation. It was great to have you back. Tell us a little bit about what you've been up to lately, and what have been some of the big insights and challenges you've had over the past couple of years with COVID, and all the exciting things that happened with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been working on actually a bunch of new books. And so the new book's Love Unfucked, Getting Your Relationship Shit Together, um,
Okay.
which has been on my mind as a topic, because there's just a lot of, in my view, a lot of slurry out there when it comes to this topic. So I really wanted
Right.
to produce something that was really could cut through a bunch of that. But like
Have
everybody
you
else,
figured out how to unfuck love in your own life?
I really do. I really do. I had a bunch of big insights over the years, but the big one for me that works in my relationship is that I'm not asking my wife to be anybody other than who she is.
Yeah, that's key.
And that's a massive thing when you give somebody the freedom to just be themselves, and it
You could
creates a
you
lot of
could extend
space.
that to parenting too, right? Do you have any kids?
I've got three boys,
Yeah.
and they're typical boys. Yeah, that is a big thing in parenting because sometimes we want our kids to be different. Like you should be in a better mood, or you should be happier, you should be this way or that way, and that can often be a big problem too, right there.
Yeah. Well, let's stick on since we already dove into that. Let's talk about unfucking love. And how did you come? What were some of the challenges that led you to come to just allowing your wife to be who she is? I
Um,
mean, what led you there, and what are some of the things that people do wrong
I
in terms?
think we have an ideal. So I talk about ideals in the book. We come in with certain ideals of how things are supposed to be, and it's based on whatever we've seen before or whatever we experienced in our lives, maybe in our
Right.
relationship or what we saw with our parents. So we walk in with those standards, and they're not always clear, but they're there. Those standards are
Right.
there. And the minute we see the relationships that kind of go off, we're a little hooked or triggered by some of those things. And when I say go off, I only mean go off in terms of the standard, in terms of how we think this should be going, which
Right.
includes how your partner should be, right? I mean, like my partner should say, I love you, and my partner should do this, and my partner should do that. And once I started questioning some of that stuff, I'm like, well, who said?
Right.
Like really, who said?
Right.
It really was a massive breakthrough for us. Just there's a lot of space in our relationship for each other. Just to, like I said, just be ourselves without the need to try and shift, move, or change yourself to make somebody
Right.
else feel happy.
Right. Yeah, that's difficult to do because our conditioning is so airtight, isn't it?
Right.
And I remember our conversation about ontology and how you're a philosopher at heart, so am I. But this study of the nature of being, most people don't take the time to do that. Like
No.
that things just are the way they are,
Right.
and then you end up getting locked in this straitjacket of. I love your use of the term standards, right? So it is you have a standard, which is a set of beliefs and expectations, and then you try to match the world to that standard. Right? And
Right.
so until you study the nature of being, you can't really address your own standards because you just think that's the way things are.
Very good. That's exactly it, Mark. It's exactly like you believe that how the world is how the world is.
Right.
Right? It's
That's
like
right.
and but it's invisible to you. Like
Right.
sometimes people talk about, and this is true in relationships, self-limiting beliefs, but you don't know your self-limiting beliefs.
Right.
You
They're hidden
are
from
them,
view. They're
right?
hidden from your view. Right.
You're just
You
doing
are them.
them, right? You just are them. You just are your self-limiting beliefs. So, but the more you see yours, the more you're like, oh, like I'd never thought. Like I think a big challenge for me early in my relationship was being fully free to express my love, to actually say that I love this person. I wasn't raised that way. I wasn't used to that. It was, I'll show you. I'll be loyal. I'll do the right thing. I'll be consistent, I'll be relentless, I'll work hard. But to actually look this person in the eye and be vulnerable and say, I love you, or sometimes, God forbid, I'm afraid of this or I'm intimidated by that, which,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very culturally Scottish, we don't do that shit.
Gary, unfuck yourself. You look really weak when you say that.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I'm just kidding.
So I had this so it's been a brilliant way to kind of explore your own being, like to explore who you are in relationship, and
Yeah.
ultimately that's all you're going to be left with, not only in life but certainly in relationships, is who are you, what are you doing, what are you up to, what matters to you, and you need to be able to answer those questions profoundly for yourself.
100% agree. And I agree with you. I think relationships are our best and most potent opportunity to gain self-awareness. I think, the cave yogis had it wrong. They had a relationship with the spirit, but a lot of them were just horrible people and couldn't have managed a marriage for the life of them.
Right. That's true. One of the things that I wanted to cut through, though, was a lot of what I call bankrupt wisdom, just stuff that if it just doesn't stand up to logic.
Right.
And there's a lot of it
Like
out there.
pop culture wisdom, or what people take from
Yeah.
wisdom?
I mean, people say stuff like, I think people frown upon, for instance, arguing, right? Like, you shouldn't
Right.
argue. I have no fucking problem with arguing. Like, it's okay. It's part of the deal. We're two people. We're trying to work things out sometimes.
Right.
So somebody
It's
said,
better than suppressing anger, right? Suppressing anger leads to all sorts of crap, right?
That's why I'm not a fan of the phrase "control your anger." I think it's a trap. You get yourself stuck in there. That doesn't mean to say you need to run with it every time, but at the same time, you have to find a way to realize that it's a human expression, and you have to find a way to get that expressed in a healthy way, in a way that works for you, in a way that works for your life. But one of the things about being in a relationship that I find curious is, as you kind of alluded to earlier, you won't get a better opportunity to work on yourself than you will when you're in a love relationship, because it grinds to the surface everything that you think you can get away with, or think you can overcome, or you think you can handle about yourself. And it includes some of those little dark corners sometimes that maybe you felt as if you have handled, or that you've been kind of trying not to handle, some of your own junk. But what people tend to do is defend it. They defend their junk rather than like, oh, this is something about me here that I need to understand a bit better, maybe explore a bit for myself.
Right.
A life unexplored, a self unexplored, you're just on autopilot. You're not really, in my view, you're not really living.
Yeah, I would agree. From what I recall from our earlier conversation, you kind of started your self-awareness work by getting involved with one of the programs that does kind of like, I liken it to clubbing you over the head
Yeah.
with your own reality, like Summit,
Yeah.
Landmark. I don't know which
Right.
organization, I can't remember,
Yeah.
but you were a head trainer for one of them. What led you
Yeah.
to that, and what were the biggest? Here's a three-part question, but it all should make sense. What led you to that? What was your biggest kind of takeaway from those experiences, and what have you learned now that you have some distance and you say, you know what, that worked then, or doesn't
Yeah.
work for me now? What have you changed since? Because a lot of people are drawn to those programs, and they're good as kind of a starter kit, just like I think Tony Robbins programs are good as a starter kit. But I'm going to take this so far.
Yeah. I got into, that was my pathway into personal development. And so I got into it to deal with my life at the time, which, again, at the time I felt as if I was just kind of like a hamster on a wheel,
Right.
like my life really wasn't going anywhere. And but once I got into it, it was the first time in my life that there was a kind of logic that made sense to me. And that really started my fascination with ontology and phenomenology and things like that.
And that program that you started with was it one of those weekend long where they lock you up?
Right,
and,
couple of days.
You have to face your reality, and they tell you you're off. Everything you believe to be true is not true, kind of stuff.
Well, I think what it did for me was for the first time it was almost like holographic, like I could see my shit,
Yes.
And I'd
Yeah.
never been able to kind of get out in front of myself to look at it. I was like, oh, now it makes sense, and it really
Right.
was like a big aha. It was like, oh, damn it,
Oh shit. Here we go.
it
Right.
really was an oh shit. It was like, damn it, I did not want this to go this way, but it was brilliant because not only did I understand it, but I got fascinated by that way of thinking. I'd never thought about myself in those terms, and that got
Right.
me into philosophy in general. But I did. I became a facilitator for them for a while, and what was remarkable about that was in really moving at times was the speed with which people could reconcile their lives for themselves. Like that
Hmm.
people could do it like that when given the right kind of logic to think it through.
Right.
And so that I've always had, people sometimes come to me and they say, well, that takes a lot of work. And I say, well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. An example that I like to use is, I've witnessed somebody hold a grudge for 30 years and give it up, like in a moment
Right.
of time, right?
They
And just give it
resisted it
up.
for 30 years, and then finally,
Right.
when they surrender, they're like, "What the hell
Right.
was I holding on?"
Right. And then I'm watching this person like, what just happened there in that 1 second when it went from there to there and everything changed. And I
Mm.
say to people, all of that's available. But with the benefit of hindsight now, I, I really loved doing that. It was brilliant. But there's just so much more to this world than just that. Like you've pointed to, it's a brilliant place to start. But now I got to explore guys like Gadamer and Husserl and Heidegger and Sartre, and I started to really explore like Alan Watts, for the love of
Mm.
God, um, and people who just blew my mind. But that door had opened for me. It was like it sprung open, and it was like, oh my gosh, I'm in this world now of basically living a philosophical life. I live a philosophical life. I take a philosophical view of everything that I do. There's no
Right.
off button to it. It's just how I interact with the world now.
Right. Since you brought up the term philosophy, help us understand from your perspective what's the difference between, let's say, different schools of philosophy like ontology, studying the nature of being, or epistemology, studying the
Right.
nature of
Well,
knowledge,
I mean,
and
so
and how do they kind of lead you in different places
right.
as a
So ontology is the nature of being, and when you really get into ontology, you'll see that everything has a being, right? There's a beingness to a situation. There's a beingness to it. The more you get into it, it becomes all encompassing. But it starts with the
Mhm.
nature of being. And you're a human being, and you're always being one way or another, right?
Right.
And contrary to what you think, it's not a whole massive range of being that your average human being exists inside of. It's a pretty set, ways of being that they are, which is different from how they start in life. Human beings
Hmm.
start in life experiencing a wide range of being, like, in lots of different ways in a day. But
Right.
after a certain amount of life under your belt, you're you, and you're the you that you've become, and that's encompassed in ways of being. So something like, for instance, phenomenology is, for all intents and purposes, if you could set aside everything you know and everything you believe and everything you understand about, for example, a tree, there's an as lived experience one has of a tree if you set
Right.
aside everything you know about it. So for me anyway, it's like it really is like this kind of profound connection to what's so phenomenology, the phenomenon as it
Yeah.
exists. That's why sometimes when people say it is what it is, right? And I like to say, no, it only is what it is after all your opinion and judgment and understanding and
Right.
knowledge of what it is. Then it
Right.
is what
Well,
it is.
and that constructed meaning is all just a story anyways.
Correct.
A
I mean,
tree is a tree to you is going to be slightly different than what it is to me. It's going to be generally the same because we've largely agreed upon
Very
the
good.
definition
Yeah.
of what it is. But
Yeah.
to a woodpecker, tree is food. And to a squirrel, it's a playground and it's a place to gather nuts. And to you know
Right.
what I mean, to a bird, it's a place to land and build a nest.
Right.
To the tree itself, who knows?
Who knows? Right. And
Right.
but the same goes for your experience of people.
That's right.
So there you are in life. They are a certain way rather than, well, maybe they just are that for me, right? I mean, I often make this joke with people. I say some of you are still totally stunned that your parents had friends, um, because because in your mind they're this thing, this phenomenon, and they're only that. But to other people, they're different things, and in fact, they're free to express other elements of themselves in other situations and circumstances that they don't necessarily have the freedom to express with you. And that's
Right.
all around you in life. And this is why when I talk about exploring being, it's exploring the potential being that you could be in any moment of time. To
Right.
me, that's fascinating for a human being.
That is fascinating. The Vedic traditions would say that my experience of you is created by me,
That's right.
not by you.
That's right. That's right.
Because everything is
But
created by me. That's the nature of mind, is to create your local reality.
that's true. And then, but when you start to come from like some of those fundamental principles of like existentialism, then I might start getting responsible for the way in which you relate to me.
Right. Exactly.
So
Now
then I
that's
might,
where you're starting to get somewhere, right? To me,
for
the
sure.
holy grail or the turning point in personal development is the responsibility for how you show up in the world and for how other people show up for you. And that requires great introspection and awareness of the quality and nature of your own thoughts and the energy that you put out in the world, because you will create the exact world that you're representing on the inside, heaven or hell. And
You
people will
know,
show up that way, just like you said about your parents. My father can show up to some people as this really good looking powerful man, and he can show up to me as an asshole.
right, right.
You know what I
And
mean? So we
when you
create
when you
those worlds.
when you said that at the beginning, like I mean, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up because people don't realize, like in that simple little way you started that phrase or that sentence, that's everything right there. I mean, that
Right.
is everything. That is like, if I'm responsible for the way that I show up, and I'm responsible for the way that you show up for me, and I could, but it's very hard to kind of prize people away from that. And this is a kind of body of work that I'm getting into right now. Is It's very hard to do it because we exist in a condition of blame. So
Right.
we exist in this constantly thriving and burning condition of blame. So
Right.
everything you do is related to blaming yourself or blaming somebody else or blaming a situation or circumstance or the world, whatever, for how you are. So sometimes when you say be responsible for how you show up, and people's immediate reaction is, well, it's not my fault. I didn't raise me.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I'm like, well, but you can't drive your car like it's not your fault, right? You have to drive that thing responsibly, right?
Unless
And
it's a
that's
Tesla.
that's a Tesla. But if you were to drive with that approach, you'll do a whole host of other things in life, like whatever you're eating. Like, well, nothing to do with me. It's not my fault. They gave it to me. Your life would take a lot of weird turns. So responsibility really is starting with the idea that you have the say, that it's on you. And it doesn't matter what's happened. It's not like what's happened doesn't matter. I mean, now it can't matter to you as much as you've made it. And in
Right.
that moment, you have to really start to take responsibility for the way that this, whatever this is playing out in your relationship, is playing out in the world. Because that's what Heidegger said. Heidegger said there is only being in the world. What he's saying is being is a worldly phenomenon. You're showing up as something.
Right.
And you have a massive say. You have all the say in what that phenomenon is or
Right.
not. And that's your
I love
choice.
this. So what's coming to my mind, Gary, is like these kind of like three broad buckets of individuals or types of people. Those who don't investigate anything and just are victims and actually feel like the victims, like the world's happening to them.
Right.
The second category is those who say, you know what, I'm going to do something about this. And so they become great doers, right? To take control of their life and to
Yeah.
build the life that they want.
Right.
And that only gets you so far, right? Because
Right.
at the end of the day, you build all this great stuff and you still feel like shit.
Right.
And the third category are those who recognize that it's the nature of being, like you said, like Heidegger says, and you know the whole ontological approach is you're actually nature of being. So you take responsibility for how you're being,
Right.
and then that affects what you do, and you do some very different things, or you do things in a very different way when you're clear about your beingness than you are if you're just a doer. And
Right.
then the third group is you kind of do just as a reaction to the way the world's acting on you. That's the victim.
Right. Well,
I just made that up. I don't know if it's accurate or
no,
not, but it feels
I
like
like what you said. I'm going to. There's a term that I use. I call them the triumphant victims. Right.
yes,
So, and
yeah,
they're constantly triumphing over whatever they've been a victim to. And then, so when you talk to people from that perspective, they generally say, "No, I'm not one of the victims. I've overcome." I'm like,
right.
I know, but the whole point of it is to overcome your victimhood, which you keep doing. Like you keep living, like you're just an angry, resentful, overcoming victim now, right? But it's still a victim. Um, and I think, there are been pivotal moments in my development all along the way. But I think one of the big things was finally just letting go of and letting people off the hook for how it turned out. Like it was just like, what am I doing? Like I think one of the worst things you can ever say to yourself is, "I'll fucking show you," right? I mean, it's okay as a context, like to kind of maybe get yourself going, but you have to realize that if you track that all the way through, you'll just become resentful. You'll just become
Yes,
resentful,
right.
and you'll grind it out, and you'll become angry. You'll never be free.
You
And
mean if you try to succeed to prove to the world or to prove to your parents or prove to
right,
your peers or to prove to whatever society that you're worthy.
right,
Yeah, I
right,
agree. And that leads to a lot of things like imposter syndrome and all sorts of feelings of inadequacy because you'll never measure up. Like
that's right. The
there's
whole
very
is
few
never filled.
technologists. You'll never measure up to the best person. You know what I mean? Even Elon Musk is probably saying to himself, "Man, I wish I could be like that person."
This guy. Well, my three boys are, they're little sports guys. They love their sports and they all play soccer. And my middle son, I mean, he's remarkable. He's an elite talent. He's only 10, and he's already
Awesome.
getting professional academies in Europe want him to come over there and all that sort of stuff. But one thing I'm always saying to him, I'm always teaching him humility. I'm always saying to him, there's always somebody better than you,
That's right.
always. And the moment you realize that, then you'll settle down to just being great yourself. Like just being, I just need to be great. I need to be great. I need to express myself. So even in my parenting, ontology plays a big part in the way that I relate to my children, the way I relate to myself, my wife. Once you've kind of got moved by, touched by, gotten by being, you can't unsee that stuff. You
You
can't.
can't unsee
It's
it.
like
Yeah,
you can't. It's you. You're locked in there.
exactly. It's interesting. I just use that term in the relationship to psychedelics. I don't know if you've ever had any experience with your clients or anything with that, but you have a psychedelic experience, with psilocybin or ayahuasca or something, and they're all kind of the
Yeah.
rage. At least they are here.
Yeah.
You can't unsee that. If you have a unity experience, even if it's facilitated or simulated, you can't unsee that, and it changes you. Now, I don't. I'm not an advocate of frequent use of those types of things
Yeah.
because then it
Yeah.
starts to seem like a recreational. I've got
Right.
some people that I know have turned that they've just shifted from maybe like alcohol to
The new
that,
thing.
and that becomes their thing, and that's
Yeah.
that's just you have a risk of spiritual bypass at that point. But you don't need that. I've had similar experiences with meditation. I've had experiences with Navy SEAL Hell Week, for example, right? that's
For
that's
sure.
kind of like est or landmark. You're
I'm
locked up
telling
for
you,
a whole
man.
week, no
The
sleep, to
military is under. You can't. perform in those kinds of environments without several transformations.
That's right. Yeah.
You cannot, like those force you to transform. You
Right.
cannot, your junk cannot survive that. People relate to that like it's all physical challenge. Oh,
It's
you're
not.
getting challenged mentally, physically, spiritually. Like it'll tear at every fiber you have. It's a transformational
Transform.
experience.
Right. You've probably heard of our SEAL Fit events. I know maybe we talked about it last time, but we run a 50-hour nonstop, no sleep training event called Kokoro. And the reason I named it that is that it means merge your heart and your mind into your actions. Because
Right,
that is essentially what you have to do in order to, and that requires a transformation, and it happens during the 50 hours. Literally, you have a whole stage development of your life unravels, and you evolve to another stage, and that stage is one where you're able to really open up to help and to being a good teammate and to loving in another individual besides your spouse or your kid with the same level of depth but in a different
right.
way.
Yeah,
And that's
it's
powerful for individualists, because we're a staunch individualist culture. We've been going it alone, since the pioneers came over here and took over the land.
mm-hmm.
But that came
the
from you guys, right? Because the Scots and the English and
it's
everyone over
true.
there was basically the same way, right? So the whole Western culture.
We're always rebelling, but I think because when I did a bunch of my training, this was about 15 years ago. There were a bunch of people on staff at the time who were former military, former SEALs,
Really?
and
Yeah.
oh yeah, there was a big, and there had been this kind of long history of guys who actually were former SEALs had come through that training. But they likened this transformational experience to their experience in training. They
Yeah.
likened it. It was this very tough. And I would say, you know, to become to pursue the kind of line of profession that I was getting into at the time, it it required me to disappear everything that I had become, and that was torturous. I mean, and it was torturous because I had to be able to stand up in front of 200 people or 300 people or 1,000 people and talk about life and everything that is to do with life and have absolutely nothing going on about it. Like nothing. Like I got nothing going on because I have nothing going on. Right. And it really is to get to that point of like, I got nothing going on. Like it's all, I've completed it all. And it was part of that included like going back all the way through my life and putting a period on the end of every sentence and sometimes having
Right.
conversations with people and dealing with things and handling things and such that no matter what you ask me, I had absolutely no attachment, had
Yeah.
nothing.
I love that because I think that you just hit on one of the most powerful practices for eradicating regret and trauma, which is, as you know, one of the things that probably the main thing that holds people back. Right? There's a lot of
Right.
areas of development, but when you look in terms of what holds you back and what keeps you stuck,
Yeah.
it's trauma from early childhood, which you shouldn't have regrets about because you didn't do shit. But then it's your behavior that results from trauma that causes you to do stupid things that you regret. So
Mm-hmm.
then it spiders out and manifests in all these different ways. And so that we call it a recapitulation. And I got this from the Toltec tradition where
Yeah.
before they allow you into the warrior class, they require you to recapitulate, which meant you had to visualize your life in reverse all the way back to birth, every single moment. And every moment that was beautiful, you appreciate, and every moment that was painful, you let it go and you
Mm-hmm.
forgive yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think you meant by putting the period after every sentence, right?
For sure. I mean, it's funny because it's kind of like layers. So, something happens and then you take that something and you live from that something. You start
Right.
taking your
That's
life
right.
in a direction. You have no real conscious sense of doing that. You're just reacting to whatever you dealt with in that moment of time. Um, I think when one of the questions that I used to ask people, and it used to freak people the fuck out, right? I mean, this would freak people out when I asked them this question. They would tell me this really traumatic thing, and I would go, okay, now what?
Now what? Yeah.
And then they'd be like, well, I just fucking told you this really traumatic thing. And I'd be like, I know, I get that. That's fucking shit. I'm sorry you went through that. But answer my question. Now what?
Right. Are you going to let
And
that
that,
define you? Right.
and if you sit there with now what, if you bathe in now what, you'll hear yourself with your typical, like what you typically do. And what used to blow people away is not only did I not have anything going on about myself, I then couldn't have anything going on about you. Mm-hmm. So whatever you told me, I have no significance about it. I'm not like, oh, that's the worst thing ever. You know, I'd just be like, I get it. That's fucking terrible. Now what? And you know, I remember like this was years ago talking to this person who'd been through her. I'm not going to be specific, but it was fucking brutal when she was 15, like brutal. And she got to the end of it, and I just sat there looking at her, and I didn't say a fucking word to that girl, not a fucking word. And she said to me, "What am I doing with my life?" I'm like, that's the question. And I think in her mind, it was the first time she'd ever really been able to, first of all, express it fully, and then secondly, sit with the impact of it, like to see how it was going to unfold. Because people kept jumping in with trying to fix her, trying to change her, trying to feel sorry for her, and I didn't. I just gave her all the room in the world just to be herself and to say whatever she needed to say and sit in silence. And it was amazing how quickly people, if you give them a little bit of silence,
yeah,
how they'll sort themselves out. It's remarkable how people can do it.
That's awesome. That's a very Buddhist perspective. You know, the Eastern perspective is that you're all right now. Everything's
correct,
perfect the way it is. So the only thing holding you back from that is you're stuck in the past or stuck in the future. So just be present and allow that.
Sure.
And so that's a beautiful way to get people there. The Western model psychotherapy it's been very valuable, but that is about doing and fixing, you know?
Right.
Fix,
right.
fix,
You
fix,
have to
do. And
right.
that's can only get you so far. Eventually, this is why the merging of the Eastern and Western models is so powerful, right? Can only get you so
For sure, because I feel as if like if you keep starting with the notion that you're broken, if you keep starting there, ultimately the aim is to, and I think this is where it falls down. Ultimately, the aim is that you'll feel not broken.
right.
You'll feel
But
that
if you're always focusing on the brokenness, then you're just reinforcing that.
fucking going to be feeling broken all the time. But I say,
right.
What if you are this way, and that's okay? But what I'm interested in is what else is available to you. Who else can you be? That's that. I get that. I'm not going to even resist that. I'm not going to fight that. I'm not going to let that be anything but itself. But what else is available? What are the new ways in which you could start to explore and experiment with this being that you are? And that's a radical world once you start getting into it, and especially in your relationship, like exploring who you are in it, you know, and being grounded in what matters to you, which you'd be amazed. I talk about values in this new book. You'd be amazed the amount of people who say, I know what my values are, and then you ask them, and they can't tell you. Like, you can't put it in any language. And I'm like, you should know. Like, what is it that fucking resonates with you as a human being?
So awesome. My first experience with that was actually my interview for the Navy SEALs. You know, you go through all these hoops, but then you have to interview with the SEAL commander. And I was actually already at Officer Candidate School when this SEAL commander came to the school, because this is pretty serious. SEALs don't want anyone without, you know, they got to meet you in person before they let you go to BUD/S as an officer.
Yeah.
And Woody Woodruff was the guy's name. You can, you know, picture the, you know, bronze, steely blue-eyed, you know, 6'3" guy. Literally was one of the first guys who invented the triathlon, the Ironman in Hawaii. You know, because a bunch of SEALs were involved in that formation of the Ironman. And he just stared at me. I shit you not, Gary, for about 8 to 10 minutes. no blinking, his eyes just like piercing through me. And my at first my skin was just crawling, like, oh shit.
Right.
Am I supposed to like stare back at this guy? So after a few minutes, my eyes shifting around, I said, fuck, I've got to do this. So I just stared back at him, but not in a cocky way, just staring at him, waiting
Right.
for the question. And so I had to open myself up to just like that presence without any like, is he, what's he want from me? No expectation. And he was just kind of gauging where I would go with that. And then he said, what do you stand for, Mark? And fortunately, because of all that silence he gave me, I didn't just go, bleh, you know what I mean? I
Right.
literally thought about that. I'm like, that's a really good question. What do I stand for? And so I started to just describe some of the things that had led me there that I stood for. That
Wonderful.
hard work was, something that I found really inspirational because it led me to grow and to feel good about myself. So I
Yeah.
was at a young age espousing a universal truth that I don't know if I would have ever come upon as a value system had, sort of like 3 or 4 of those. And he was like, all right, good job. See ya,
I'm
buds.
telling you, there was something brilliant that he did, though, and I mean brilliant, and it's actually a phenomenon. So when he looked at you and kept looking at you,
Right.
all of that initial stuff that was right there in the first minute or two, that's all your persona.
That's right. This is my
So you're
ego
so
just
just
screaming,
and it can't, and your persona can't be with that. Like it can't.
I
But
know.
if you keep looking and looking, it'll get quiet, and
Right.
you'll get quiet. And that's the other side of it. Now you're on the other side of it. Now you're in this thing called truth,
Right.
or rather, truth for you. So
Yeah. I've
when he
seen
asked
that.
you that, that was you gave him the truth.
Gave him the truth as it, without any script, right? It just kind of came out.
Yes, right. It's what's there for you.
Yeah,
That's
looking in
brilliant.
another human being's eyes can be very uncomfortable
Yeah,
for a lot of people, like you said, because of the ego, and so you resist it.
right,
I've seen this used, and I've participated in it in conflict resolution before
right,
with my
right.
family.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
boy,
But it
when you sit
works.
there and stare for 5 minutes in another person's eyes, and you're looking at their soul, and then finally you get to the end of that, and you're like, I am looking at myself here.
I'll tell
Right.
you something, man. So this was a long time ago. I did a similar exercise, and I had to get paired up with somebody, to do this. And I was paired up with this freaking 75-year-old woman, and I'm like, oh fuck,
Right.
Jesus Christ, so Jesus, fucking Jesus. So I'm standing there, and so at the beginning, you're kind of good,
Right.
it's good to
Yeah, and
see,
when you look around, you see that happening with everybody. They're all
all
like,
the
eyes are
fucking
flitting all over the
people like fucking
heads are
all over the
turning.
joint. But then there's a moment in it though where like that curtain just drops, and
Right.
I remember like I had this experience of like just knowing and being known. Like I know you,
Mhm.
and I didn't know this
Mhm.
fucking person from Adam, but like I know you, and I experienced it, and it was so moving for me. It was like because at that whole like shellac of persona, if you like, it's grounded in our fundamental fear of other human beings, our fundamental like you're there, I'm here, you're there, I'm here. So every time people are presenting themselves to you, they're presenting the Roman centurion shield to you. You're getting the fucking polished best version. But in those moments when you can be with another human being and look them right in the eye and be with that, and I don't just mean look them in the eye, like I mean like be with them. Um, you really get that's another one of those things you can't unsee it.
You
You
can't.
get
Yeah.
people's humanity, their humanity, and your humanity, and that we're all just fucking trying to wrestle with this thing.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the once you've seen that though, it's one of those things. It gives you a lot of room for other people. Again, you get room for where people are at. I don't have to resist it. I don't have to fight it. I just give it some room.
That's right. I love that. Let's say that I was one of your screwed up clients, and I'm
Yeah,
saying that jokingly and lovingly. And I just told you my horror story, and you
yeah,
said, okay, what's next? I want to go to. You've got these 7 assertions. How would you coach me
right.
through? How would you coach me using those 7 assertions?
Using the assertions. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, usually, I think the answer to what's next for a lot of people is one they need to ponder, one they really
Yeah.
need to think about, because we're so rooted in trying to fix, change, alter,
Right.
that when you really consider what's next, if I'm not going to be fascinated by that, then really what's next? But it always comes down to the willingness part. So being willing and being unwilling, by the way, both work very powerfully.
Right.
But sometimes I ask people, like, okay, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do that. Are you willing to live with that life?
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment, it's a bit of a trick question, right? So the moment you answer yes, I'm willing, you're responsible.
Right.
You have to be, because you just declared
Yeah.
yourself willing.
What are you willing to give up or to do in order, to
Right,
fulfill that
right.
willingness? Right.
And then some unwillingness works the same way. It's like, I might say, I'll say, are you unwilling to continue having the life you've got? And sometimes people find a little bit of resolve in that, a little bit of like, yeah, fuck this shit. Like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to live this life anymore. But ultimately, with everything that I do, is about getting you grounded in you're the one, and I
Mm-hmm.
must get you there with. And there's lots of different ways of doing it. But not only you the one, but you're going to be the one moving forward, and you'll always be the one. And however this is going, you're the one. I remember years ago, this was in a work situation. I called up my immediate superior, and this was very much a transformational environment. And I said, "Oh, this place is fucked up, and this and that, and this is bullshit. I'm sick of this." And I'm like, "What am I going to do?" And then there was this bit of silence, and they said, "Well, thank God you're there." I was like, "Damn it, damn it, damn it!" Now I need to go fix all this shit. But I really got it. Like, I really got impacted by, you're the one. Like, this is stop pretending like you're not built for this, because
Right.
you are. You're no matter what life's throwing at you, and you'll absolutely testify to this given your training. Your capacity goes far beyond anything you can even imagine for yourself.
That's right.
Like, it goes way beyond. You have so much capacity for life, so much
Right.
capacity for the remarkable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the work you're doing is phenomenal, and we need more of it. Because it seems to me that no matter how much we do, it's like a tsunami of negativity and conflict in the world.
That's right.
And so how
That's
do
right.
we how do you, I mean, writing books and podcasts and stuff like that is probably the
Yeah.
answer, but how do you scale what you do? How do we reach more people to
Well,
help
I think,
them make the shift to beingness, which is positive and inclusive, to
yeah,
stare in the eyes of another human being you've never met, different culture. I would love to do that with a Chinese right now, or
right.
a Russian. Be like, yeah, I
Absolutely.
see the humanity in you,
Well, I think one of the things
and
that,
have them do the same. Of course.
well, yeah, right. I sometimes feel as if, I guarantee your average person from those countries would absolutely love to do the same.
Yeah.
I guarantee you. But the one thing that, see, if you get why people don't do it first. So why don't people get out there and make the difference, right? And I assert it's two things. I think the first thing is, people say to themselves, "Well, I will, but I'm fucked up. I need to sort this out first," right? They don't realize, like, the way to transcend that is to be someone who shows up in the world, right? That's actually how you start to impact that and break that up. You realize that life is bigger than your primary concerns.
Hmm.
So that's the first thing you got to kind of first address, is stop making it about you. Stop.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking, I know there's people probably listening and going, "Oh no, I'm always making it about me." No, I mean, like, unconditionally. Most people make it about, make it about others, but they're looking for something on the back end. Like, "Oh, I'm
Right.
always
It's
making it about you."
transactional. Right. Right.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
I say, well, but if you just were that way, if you took on showing up in this world as somebody,
Right.
and then I think the other thing is, at a very deep level with human beings, I really feel as if if you were to get down to it with them, they would say, I'm just one person, I'm just one voice. And it's all just code for ultimately I don't matter. I'm just
Mm-hmm.
1 in 8 billion.
Right.
And I say, but you got to show up in your family, and you got to show up with your neighbors, and you got to show up with that Amazon delivery driver, and you got to show up, and you got to show up, and you got to show up, and you got to keep showing up, and you got to show up as the kind of person that when you're there, life is different. It's
Yeah.
not the same. You show up and it's different. And, like, I mean, I do speaking engagements. I don't do a whole bunch of them, but I do some of them. And I've done them with Tony Robbins, there are like 30,000 people there. And the first thing I do is get off the platform, down on the floor, and I walk right up the back, and I talk up at the back of the room. And I go talk to people like we're just talking, because I don't want to give you a speech or pitch you something. I want to be somebody who not only what I'm saying makes a difference, but that who I am makes a difference.
Right.
And that can be at the supermarket, and that can be doing a podcast or writing a book or whatever. But when it's your life, Mark, when this is who you are, the the possibility of it, the potential of it, just keeps opening up and opening up and opening up, because it's in everything that you're doing.
That's right. I agree, and I love that. So when people have to have that shift to recognize that their mindset, their attitudes will create the world around them,
Oh
and
my
then to
gosh.
recognize that if I'm not only does this impact me, but it impacts everybody. Because if I'm creating hell for myself, then Amazon driver I just dropped a little hell bomb on, and that person in the checkout line I just dropped a little hell bomb on, and everywhere I go I'm making everyone's
Right.
life worse.
Or I
And then
said
you
nothing.
imagine, yeah, you imagine that being played out with 7 billion people. It's no wonder the world
Right.
could be a shit show.
Right.
Now flip that the other way. If every interaction we have, we aspire to be positive and drop a little love bomb. Imagine billions of people doing that every day.
Right. Right. I
So
mean,
that's how you scale,
do you know the
the
weird thing to me is
heaven on
like
earth, so to speak.
the weird thing to me is sometimes at the end of the local news, you'll see some story about somebody who did something that was kind.
Right.
And I'm like, why the fuck is this making the news? like,
Be
like
normal, right?
that should be what we're doing. Like, why aren't we just doing this? And it's funny because when you are kind with people, and and so I see this reaction all the time. They're like, what do you want? Like, what's in it for you? Kind of deal. And I'm like, nothing. There you go. Like, I
Yeah.
don't need anything. This is what I do. This is who I am. And there is no greater gift in this life than the freedom to go be who you are.
Yeah, I love that. That's probably a good place to put a pin on this because we're going for a while. So, love unfucked or loved unfucked, right?
You're right.
Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Of course, you don't spell the word out in the title. They don't let you do
Right.
that.
I'm
But
trying to be kind of polite without really being polite.
so to learn how to be in relationship,
For
that's
sure.
powerful. I love that.
Yeah.
That's going to help a lot of people. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you, like on social media, website, and stuff?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Gary John Bishop. Have my website, garyjohnbishop.com. I'm on Twitter a little bit. I'm on Facebook for the oldies.
Yeah.
I'm one of the oldies.
Same here.
I'm one of the oldies. And then my podcasts are there on Fuck Nation, which is it's a little bit of a different format. I really kind of use it to just share an idea a week and
Okay.
take a question. Maybe somebody's dealing with something. I'll unpack their question. But yeah, I mean, I'm active. I'm out there, and I'm making the difference that I profess to make. So yeah,
Good
you'll
for you.
find me out there.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing what you're doing, and thanks for coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun
Awesome,
reconnecting and chatting. Yeah.
awesome,
So,
Mark.
yeah.
Thank you. Always great to talk with you.
Likewise, Gary. Take care. Yeah.